My name's Rob, and you may know me from a Twitch and YouTube channel called Slant Alpha Adventures. Our captain for the series is Max, who you may know from a YouTube and Twitch channel called Citation Max. On behalf of Max, the Vet USA, and myself, welcome to our flight across America. In previous episodes, we went over how to choose our origin, destination, and route. We briefed our departure procedure, pushed back and taxied out, and took off. Let's resume now as Max is arriving at his cruise altitude.
So 35,000 feet, just got to cruise. We got 7.6. That's going to be our fuel remaining on board when we do arrive. We're 484 miles. And one other thing, sometimes you can get a discontinuity from your arrival or whatever it might be along your route of flight, and the plane will start turning left or turning right. So even that we did a route verification and we briefed everything out, really good to just verify everything here. Everything still looks good. So no discontinuities. And then we're Mike Bravo, and then onto the Hides arrival. So, oh, that's interesting. So that's very interesting. So remember we put in Philgo? This is a great example here, guys. So after Mike Bravo, it's Philgo, Hides, and the Jeffrey 5. So that's just a good example of catching things. So these computer systems are really complex. They're complicated. Sometimes things just get deleted or something happens. You fat finger a button, whatever it might be. I got big fat fingers. So we're going to put in that fix here of Philgo. And that's after the Mike Bravo. So we're going to do that. Philgo. And this is a good example. This is what a discontinuity would look like, right? So we're going to go here and clear that out. So it's a nice Golf Charlie Kilo, Mike Bravo, Philgo, and then Hides for the Jeffrey 5. Insert that.
Let's cut in right here for a very important discussion. When can you delete a discontinuity and when can't you? It all boils down to the question of what did your IFR clearance say? One common example of a discontinuity is when your planned route includes a SID with a transition, and then you're going straight from that transition to a VOR or some other waypoint where you're joining an airway. The FMC will insert a discontinuity there because it's not obvious what happens after the end of the SID, but before you join the airway. If your IFR clearance simply has you going direct between those two, that's a discontinuity you can close up. The programmed route would then now reflect what your clearance says. The classic case of the discontinuity you should not erase is one which gets inserted at the end of a star but before joining the approach. Unless it's a star which has a common waypoint with that approach procedure, the star will often say something like, then on heading blank, or then on track blank, expect vectors to final approach course. That means stay on that last heading until ATC tells you to turn and join the approach. If you close up that discontinuity and you don't put the plane in heading mode before crossing that last waypoint, your autopilot's going to follow the route you put in the box. It's going to turn you straight from the end of the star toward the beginning of the approach. All too often when a VATSIM controller asks the pilot, why are you turning toward the airport right now? Common response they hear is, my FMC is messing up. But what's really happening is the FMC is doing exactly what the pilot told it to do, which was to fly a straight line connecting the end of the star with the beginning of the approach. Don't tell the FMC to do that, and neither you nor it will mess up. Now in Max's case, the discontinuity happened when he was modifying the route, and the FMC detected he had already passed the beginning of that procedure. So it wasn't obvious how Max intended to connect it to the rest of the route, hence the discontinuity. That allowed Max to evaluate it and realize that yes, he did want the box to go ahead and connect those 2 points.
Kansas City, very good evening to you. American 503, flight level 350. It's smooth.
American 503, Kansas City, Anaheim, boys.
What's going on, there? All right, that's our friend Mr. Derek Hood.
American 503, clear direct to the Mike Bravo.
Direct Mike Bravo, American 503. All right, Mike Bravo. So you always want to
291 leaving airspace to the north.
Mike Bravo.
Chicago
Confirmed.
Center is offline.
Direct.
Radar service terminated. Frequency change approved. Good night.
We're nav. Direct Mike Bravo.
Yeah.
When ATC gives you a shortcut, it's important to know how to adjust the route in your airplane accordingly. If a controller sees your path ahead is clear and they can shortcut you without causing a conflict, it's kind of their job to get you to your destination more efficiently. And realistically, part of your job as an airline captain is to save as much fuel as you safely can. So you should accept any shortcuts you're given. And sometimes, in addition, the controller really needs that shortcut because they're trying to close a gap in spacing ahead of you or create a gap in spacing behind you. So it's not always just them being nice, they need your cooperation on these reroutes. Speaking of shortcuts, we're going to time warp ahead just a little bit and let Max start talking about briefing his star, the Jeffrey 5 arrival.
Kilo 3 arrival, northwest, transition, the altimeter 2984.
Okie dokie. So we are currently 339 miles from Dallas. Looking really good. It's got a nice little push here, 45 knot tailwind-ish, about 30 knot component. So that is very good news. And we're going to start getting ready for the arrival now into Dallas and start briefing up everything here. So right now we're going to be on the Jeffrey 5 arrival. So we're going to come over here and go Dallas arrival. Make sure we have the correct one, the Jeffrey 5 RNAV arrival. We're going to go night chart so it looks really good. All right, so we're coming in from the Hides transition here. That's the start of the arrival. All right, so we got Hides and then belly at 280 knots and below flight level 300 and above flight level 240. So here we can basically be anywhere in between below flight level 300 and above flight level 240. Then our next fix is the jet. Disregard that. That's for the belly transition. And then we're coming in through Masty. That's above 16. Greg's at 11 at 250 knots. So that's important there. At 11,000 feet and 250 knots. Then it's Minky and Jeffrey. From that point on, we're going to be flying a
721, Kansas City 11.
143 degree heading. Very important here, guys. You see this kind of a star with a circle around it? That's a fly over waypoint. All these other fixes here are fly by waypoints. But when you have a circular around the star there, that's a fly over waypoint. So crucial. So once you go over Jeffrey, we're going to fly that 143 heading until they tell us to do something else. Very important.
Yes, I am. I'm back.
Very important. So we're going to fly that 143 heading until they tell us to do something else.
Let's talk about some different types of stars you might encounter on your flight. First of all, there's a term we use a lot, and it has different meanings in different contexts, and it's the word transition. Basically, when we're talking about a SID or a star, a transition is like a fork in the road. It's a portion of the procedure which splits off into multiple possible paths. In the case of stars, it can appear in two different contexts. It could be the transition from the end of your en route path onto the main path of the star, or it's the transition from the central common route onto the different runways or arrival directions. So now that we have that established, there are three common types of stars which split off into different approach transitions. One is a star which has a transition for when the airport is landing east, and another when the airport is landing west. For example, it could be north and south depending on the airport. The arch arrival into St. Louis is a good example of this. Second, there may be a star with different transitions for specific runways. The J Fund arrival into Boston is like this. They have a transition for runways 4 right and left, transition for runway 15 right, transition for the 22s, a transition for 27, and a transition for runway 32 or 33 left. Finally, there are stars that are only valid for a certain landing direction. Max's arrival, the Jeffrey 5 into Dallas, is a prime example, and it is used both for Dallas-Fort Worth and Dallas-Love, just FYI. But here we see in the notes where it says, if the airport is landing north, expect the Herb's RNAV star. In cases like this, if you file a star for one direction, but the airport's landing in the other direction, it's not a big deal. But you should expect ATC at some point to issue you a mid-flight reroute and you'll need to know how to operate the FMC and make those changes literally on the fly. Finally, there are two main types of stars in terms of vertical profiles as well. A descend via is a star like the Jeffrey where you see a series of altitude and speed restrictions along the path. So instead of ATC having to clear you down to each one, they can simply say one time, descend via the Jeffrey 5 arrival. And that means you can just follow this entire plan down to the lowest published altitude restriction on the chart. On the Jeffrey 5, that's 11,000 feet, at this point, Greg's. Now, be careful. You might have points with lower restrictions in your FMC, but those will be coming from an approach procedure, not the Jeffrey 5 arrival, and you haven't been cleared to start that approach yet. Descend via the arrival only clears you as low as the lowest point published on that arrival. The second type of star doesn't have those altitude restrictions. Let's look at the Parch 3 arrival into John F. Kennedy. Note here that we have some expected altitudes. At Trait, expect flight level 240. At Calverton, expect 12,000. At Rober, expect 9,000. A controller can't tell you to descend via the arrival in this case because these expected altitudes aren't firm assignments. They'll have to issue you an explicit crossing restriction. And on this one, a lot of times they'll say cross Calverton, Charlie, 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 at and maintain 12,000, speed 250 knots. The chart tells you to expect it, but now the controller has actually assigned it. They could also just tell you to descend and maintain 12,000, and in that case, it's not explicitly stated that you have to be at that altitude by the time you cross the Calverton VOR.
Dodger 3 traffic, 11 o'clock, 40 miles westbound, 34073.
American 503, we're looking.
828 Whiskey Whiskey, Kansas City, hello. For direction of flight, would you like 40030?
Go outside here and start seeing. I actually didn't hear exactly where in direction he was referring the traffic was. 1,000 feet below us there. I caught us at 34, but don't see the traffic right now.
503, contact Fort Center 135.17. Good night.
3517, American 503. Have a great night, Derek. We'll see you.
You will see.
All right, 3517. Here we go. All right, so visual approach 3-1 left, 3-1 right in use. That is good. We're going to plan 3-1 left. The winds haven't changed much. Exactly the same.
Southwest 1198, your radar contact,
Delta,
41 miles north of Lubbock VR.
11 degrees Celsius. So we're just going to put that in here, 11 degrees. The altimeter 3006, 30.06. And then we'll do the approach here in a second. Fort Worth, good evening, American 503, flight level 350.
American 503, Fort Worth Center, good evening, welcome aboard.
Good evening. All right.
Fort Worth Center, 117 Echo. Do I have clearance to descend via Star? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
All right,
November
so
1172
that
Echo,
is
yes,
brief
sir,
here. We're going to
descend
go.
via the Herbs on arrival at Dallas altimeter.
We're going to look here. Any notes? Jet aircrafts, when Dallas is landing north, expect the Herbs arrival. So that's interesting.
Descend via Herbs on arrival, altimeter
We filed the
3006.
Jeffrey,
Roger,
but
thank you.
we might not be getting the Jeffrey. So we'll have to play that by ear and see what's going on with that.
524 Mike Golf, ready to go, 36 at San
Transition
Angelo.
level 180, so that's where we're going to
Remember,
go.
524 Mike Golf, the winds are 3208, runway 35.
That's where we're going to go out of standard and whatever the current altimeter that air traffic control has given us is what we'll be doing. So that is good there. No other notes that apply to us here. Everything else looks really good. So for the approach, again, key point here. So it's a beautiful day in Dallas. It's gorgeous. It's a visual, right? We can see probably 50 miles away. When you're going into busy airports, the big metroplexes, and really this is for any airport, very important that you always have a procedure loaded in the FMS. So if it's an ILS approach, an RNAV approach, if there is an ILS approach, load the ILS approach. If there's no ILS approach, load the RNAV approach. Very, very important. So for Dallas Love, we obviously have an ILS. We're probably going to get the visual approach. Air traffic control is probably going to vector us for the visual approach. They're going to say, hey, American 503, the airport's 12 o'clock in 10 miles. You got it in sight? Yes, sir, we do. Right, if we have the airport. But they could also say, American 503, you have the airport in sight? Yeah, we do. Okay, American 503, turn left, heading 340. Join the final approach course inbound. You're cleared the visual approach, doing left. if we don't have that loaded up, we are scrambling. We got so much stuff going on. We're heads down. We're trying to load stuff up. We're way behind the airplane, right? And the key to this is, how do you stay ahead of the airplane and just always have something loaded up? Because at any point, air traffic control could change something up on you, right? Even if it's a nice day, it doesn't matter.
Max will get his descent instruction, and we'll see what happens with him having filed a landing south arrival when the airport's landing north. On behalf of Max and VATUSA, my name's Rob, and thanks again for joining us for our flight across America. I got dogs that are pitter-pattering all over the floor. I think they're going to lay down and I'll be able to do this.
Okay, 1522, expect the LDA approach from Kremling unless you'd like something different.
Yeah, that works.
Southwest 1897, descend via the C3 arrival, Denver's landing to the south.